Yay! Looks like it's working. So for this project, I decided to research Ruthellen Josselson's theory on women's development. Josselson states in her report that in forming and sustaining our identity, we build a bridge between who we feel ourselves to be internally and who we are recognized as being by our social world. By applying some of the items that she comes up with during her report, we can use these tricks and these thoughts to apply them to our modern day experience in student affairs and help young women build that bridge and maintain it. First, we will talk about the reason for the theory and why it is needed. When theories began to be developed on how students develop throughout college, most students were white and were male. As McGowan states, many of the early theories on identity development did not account for other social identities. For example, now women, people of color, people of different religious backgrounds, different gender and sexual identities make up a large percentage of college students. For this reason, we now need theories that explain how those who are not white males develop throughout the college years. This is what leads us to Josselson's theory. Josselson altered James Marcia's theory of identity to apply to women. Her theory was mostly based on how much young women differed from who they were in their childhood. Josselson divided the women that she studied into 4 categories based on their commitment to their identity and their exploration of their identity. The first type is the pathmaker. Pathmakers are independent and write their own future. They have explored many identity options and have picked one and made a commitment. They in general begin to experiment on identity as soon as they leave home and are often considered the most developmentally advanced. The pathmakers discover what their values are and build their identity upon those values. However, sometimes pathmakers can struggle with the success of others. For example, Betty, one of the young women that Josselson studied, supported her husband and herself with her own salary once she graduated from school. Once her husband began his career and began to make money, he made enough money that Betty no longer needed to work, and this led her to feel unneeded. She and her husband had to work through this and make some changes to their lives so that she could win back her autonomy and her independence and continue to feel like the pathmaker that she is. The second type is guardians. Guardians have high commitment but low exploration. They, in general, stick to the path that they have been on since they were children. A lot of times their decisions are made or based on their parents or another trusted advisor. Their parents are usually highly involved throughout the college years as well, oftentimes giving input and thought in terms of decisions. Guardians oftentimes are afraid of change and are very comfortable with consistency. Eventually, however, these guardians do tend to transition from relying so heavily on their parents to finding who they are on their own. For example, Fern had always dreamed of being a physical therapist, and she ended up getting a good job at a hospital once she graduated. This job paid well. However, eventually resources were cut from her department, and the level of care that she could give was cut as well. She knew that her parents would want her to keep the high salary that came with her job. However, she also knew that she couldn't live with herself if she wasn't giving good care. So she decided to make her own decision to leave her job and to begin her own practice. The third type that Josselson identified is the searcher. Searchers have done much exploring in terms of their identity but have not been able to tag down and make a commitment. They're constantly exploring different options for their identity. These people want to be independent but aren't entirely sure how to take that step. Searchers tend to divide themselves or separate themselves from their families in a more extreme way than the other 3 type of women that Josselson identified. They have beliefs, but they are not sure how to turn them into values and apply them to their lives. Therefore, they oftentimes model their lives based on those around them and find someone that they like and tend to try to live that way. For example, Sandra was identified as a searcher by Josselson. When her education came to an end, she had not yet made a commitment to her identity. She ended up finding different people that she looked up to and wanted to be like, and ended up just turning to them and modeled her behavior and her decisions on them. The final type that Josselson discovered was drifters. Drifters have not done any identity exploring. They also haven't committed to an identity. Drifters tend to not like making decisions, and she said that they oftentimes can be described as still waiting for life to happen to them. Josselson also stated that a lot of these women are often still waiting for their lives to begin, sometimes even into their 30s or 40s. One example of this is Vicky, who Josselson identified as a drifter. She left home as a young adult for university, but by the time she was back in her 30s, she had moved back very close to her parents' home. This was because she had not discovered who she was, and she needed the refuge and the safety of her parents' place in order to gain an idea of organization and planning. Ruthellen Josselson's theory and study were done a number of years in the past. However, a number of her topics can be applied to modern student affairs. As a current student affairs professional, I've experienced firsthand what we call helicopter or even lawnmower parents. These are parents who see any problem that their student might face and try to do everything they can to get that problem out of their student's way. If their student is having a hard time in a class, the parent gets a hold of the professor. If the student is not getting along well with their roommate, the parent calls the residence hall director and arranges for the student to be moved. This is enforced by modern technology because now parents can get a hold of their students very, very easily, and in addition, a lot of times they can also, if allowed through FERPA, gain access to information on how their child is doing in college online. College students sometimes feel stifled based on the way that their parents are treating them, so they try to escape this influence, but sometimes are unable to. This leads to stunted developmental growth for these students. For example, path makers are not allowed to develop and explore as much as they would. And guardians, searchers, and drifters who tend to be on the safer side, they're not encouraged to become more independent and make a commitment or explore who they might be. Student affairs professionals, we have the job of guiding students into adulthood from teenager age. And our goal is to help students become autonomous along the way.